Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Dr. Joe Ferko, and you're probably wondering what is a physician doing in front of your group as marine surveyors. One of my little keys is that I have been involved with disaster response since I was 9 years old. You might wonder, how the heck did you get involved in disasters at 9 years old? Well, I happened to be during 1972, Hurricane Agnes happened to be on the west side of the river with my family. And we were the last or the first, whichever you want to say, trying to cross across the bridge in Wilkes-Barre, PA, while the Susquehanna was already overflowing the bridge, and we got stopped. And as a result of that, my father happened to be a full-bird colonel, brigadier accepted, that got put in charge of the whole west side of the river for that event. So I ended up in the shelter, and I said, there was about 2,000 people in the shelter, and I said, I want to do something. So they immediately assigned me the kitchen, and I was the pot scrubber on my very first disaster. So I learned from the very best. In all honesty, I've been involved with disaster medicine for about 40 years. I have a company called EMS Innovations, which I have patented 28 medical products and produced 68 different products specific to emergency response. I have been an advisor to many of the international disaster teams, the White House Medical Unit, and very numerous other agencies, three-letter agencies that I really can't talk about. Here in Annapolis, Maryland, and have been here for many years now. And what I want to do is tell you a little bit about disaster response and how we do it in the United States, how it's done in other countries, and where do you fit in. So we've got some broad topics. I'm going to try and make this an interactive program. The slides are not changing now.
That's easy to solve.
So if you give me 1 second. And I'd like to thank Mr. Wren for inviting me. He surveyed my boat for me, and that's how I got to know him. Okay, so disasters happen every day. Something important for you to know about disasters is a shooting of 4 individuals can be a disaster for that community. Likewise, an opportunity that a hurricane takes upon, let's say, Louisiana back in 2005 and causes 220,000 people to be drowning at a rate of 1 per minute is an example of something that would go from local to national to international. But the key to this is that it's an overwhelming task for the people who must try to solve it. That's the key to the word disaster. They happen every day, and they're always the same type of response. It's an all-hazard response. And I'll get into that later. Disasters usually, as I said, are local events. For example, the shooting that we had in Annapolis, we handled that completely locally. There was no federal assistance until after the event when the feds came in to investigate. But the incident itself was controlled locally. Some of the major disasters that we've had here, the Amtrak train disaster, I don't know if you guys can remember back to 1986, when we had a train disaster that 320 people that were injured and a total of 495 people that were on the train. We had 14 people that were killed in that incident, but yet 320 injured. So, although they're local, we can take it to the catastrophic level, and they become national disasters. Now, how many of these do you think that we have on an average per year? Anybody? Yep, here's the answer right here. Approximately 425 to 450 national disasters per year. a lot more than I think many of you would assume. One of my biggest instances was when the governor, who was Democrat of Louisiana, and the president, who were Republican, was a Republican at the time of Hurricane Katrina, couldn't agree whether or not this was a local event or a federal event. And I had the privilege of being tapped by the president to go and be an intermediary between, intermediary between the state and the government. When I was sent, I had no idea what we were happening. I had an interesting situation at the time. I had a brother who was West Point Army Ranger grad that was actually the special assistant to the Secretary of the Navy at the time. I had another brother that was another West Point grad that was the special assistant secretary of the Army at that time. And I was the doctor on the scene. Needless to say, if you read the Katrina report, you'll see that our Ferko 1, Ferko 2, and Ferko 3. I'm Ferko 1. I was the oldest, and I deserved that. Obviously, they had a lot more power than I did. When I get down there, there happened to be also a EMS conference going on at the time, and I had a whole team down there for that conference, and they had a 50-bed portable hospital with them. At the 2 months prior to the incident, I had been training the state of Louisiana Department of Health. They had purchased 4 50-bed portable hospitals and had those available for this incident. What I can tell you is that when I get down there, the governor said, "We don't think we need any federal aid." The governor's financial advisor said to me, "Joe, don't spend more than $5 million or you'll bankrupt the state." I'd spent $50 million on the way down. And their opinion of what was going on after I had the situation report from my team who were in New Orleans was a lot different. And in fact, my famous quote back to the White House was, "I have approximately 220,000 people drowning at a rate of 1 per minute." And they said, "Go, do what you have to." I will tell you that the president did fly in on that Thursday. This was right before Labor Day weekend, coming up very shortly in the sense of where we are now. Thursday evening, he asked the governor to appoint this a federal event. Now, you may not know this, but the governor said no. And that incident, she wanted 24 hours to decide whether or not she needed federal help. That night, there were 100 National Guardsmen that got stuck in a firefight inside the dome. Also, the convention center was taken over on Thursday night. On Friday morning, out of calls for help that were heard by the National Guard in Texas, which is, by the way, where the Army was standing up all their supplies, and the Navy was standing up all their supplies offshore. So the quickest intervention was to get the Iwo Jima to come into the port, which, by the way, was closed. So it basically steamed through into the port and launched a Marine Recon 1 force attack on both of the, and it was nothing short of an attack on the convention center as well as on the dome. I can't tell you what happened. I know that I did. And I got a call from the Iwo Jima arms man who said, "Dr. Ferko, all rounds and all munitions are accounted for." I said, "That's great. Are they in people or are they in person?" And he says, "Can't tell you, sir, but from my perspective, everything's accounted for." So that's kind of things that you face when you're in a disaster. Now, what you probably didn't know was this is the first problem we had. We couldn't get to the buildings. Uh-oh, it's automatically changing here. We couldn't get to the buildings. We could not get to the boats. In fact,
I don't know why it's doing that.
we're not even sure it was safe to go into those boats to check and see whether or not the people that were living in those boats, these were all liveaboard boats, were alive or safe. Question to you. Are they safe for us to climb on? Should we put the dogs in? Should we put the personnel in? What's the risk to our rescuers? Well, I don't know. I certainly know that those boats aren't in any way shored up. I certainly know that there's enough debris that goes up to my waist. So how do I clear this area? Next question is, where do I belong? Okay, so you're sitting back there and you're saying, hey, Joe, there must be a reason that you're talking to marine surveyors, and you must have an agenda here. And I do, and that is, you know some things that we don't. Now, I'm a captain, a master captain, 100 ton, and looking to get bigger hour or more hours on bigger ships for those who are out there. But I only have a limited knowledge. To that extent, I can handle the triage. I can handle all the coordination of the patients. I can handle the political aspect of it. I can even set up 15 1,000 bed portable hospitals and 3 search and rescue bases that handled 60,000 people per day combined to clear 180,000 patients in 72 hours. That's what we did. So what I need help with is things that this causes. And the question is, are you ready to work in an austere environment like this? And if you are, we've got some things that we need from you. Now, according to the guidelines for roles in mitigation of disasters, emergency preparedness and response services have to be consistent with the scope of practice for the specialty or area in which the provider is practicing. Okay, so I'm a captain. I can sail that vessel, or I can drive that vessel. But I can't tell you whether or not the people are going to be in the front or in the back. I can't tell you what the stability is on this. If you ask me how much the boat weighed, I can't tell you that. If you ask me how to put the fire out most effectively, I'd say use foam, but there's a limited amount of foam out there. There are a lot of factors, like how big of a tugboat do I need to move a big ship? How many tugboats do I need to move a big ship? What's their draft? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, there's somebody called an emergency manager. They're in all of your local communities, and they're in the federal government, then they're in every one of the teams. In every hospital, there's an emergency manager. Every county probably now in the United States have an emergency manager. But perhaps you don't know what those people are tasked to do. They're supposed to, in advance, identify possible issues and GIS issues for their community, find funds and grants to get protective equipment and supplies and personnel prepared for a disaster, manage those funds, set the expectations of the community. Let me repeat that. Set the expectations of the response to the community. My God, talk about Maui. Okay, let's not shut off the water. Let's use some of the sirens. Let's not block our egress routes. And by the way, why aren't blue cars and blue roof buildings burning? I don't know. I'm just not an expert in that area. But how do you set those expectations? Educate the community. Train the responders, including people like yourself. Attend meetings in whatever role the county thinks that they should be in, or the hospital thinks they should be in, or the police department thinks they should be in, or the governor thinks they should be in, et cetera, et cetera. Develop standards. Okay, well, that's a little bit easier because they do just like you and I do, is they share all of their notes over the internet, and they help each other write each other's standards and expectations. Make the purchases of equipment, including establishing vendors that they can rely on during the disasters. Establish co-ops and teaming documentations. So if I want other people on my teams, other than the fire department, the ambulance, the police, the first aid groups, the Baptist Health Ministry, the Catholic Ministry, you know, all of those groups that want to help in disasters, I need docs on that, and just about any other thing that you can think of. These people are looking to bring people together to form teams to accomplish what they are tasked with, which is impossible for them to do. Okay, so this is easy. We can set up a 20-bed portable hospital with 3 individuals in 6 minutes. Okay, I can set up a 50-bed portable hospital with 6 individuals, including OR, X-ray, bathrooms, the whole 9 yards in less than 1 hour. Okay, I can set up a 1,000-bed hospital in an existing structure in about 3 to 4 hours. Okay, so this can be done. We know it. We've done it many, many times. So one of those things, that's one of my competencies. But what are the basic competencies for emergency responders? And how would this work with you? Let's just say that at the end of this, you feel a desire to get involved, community participation, maybe at the local level or maybe at the federal level. Well, we've got to describe exactly what we want from you. We have to give you the chain of command. We have to know your capabilities, and you need to know the agency's plan. You need to know and demonstrate your functional roles, i.e., okay, if you're not going to be able to help me for a ship that's 250 feet long, and you're going to be able to help me in it, I need to know that, because I need you both, not one, right? Know how to communicate and how to use equipment to communicate properly, and the proper procedures as to when to use it. Oh my God, any Saturday or Sunday, just listen to the channels on the radio. We got a lot of captains out there, we got a lot of wannabe captains out there that really don't know what's appropriate to put on the radio. Did you see the lady? No, never mind. Did you see the man over, you know, I think he was wearing a bikini. Oh, anyhow. Know your role, know your limits of knowledge. I think that's one of the best things. Skills and authority and the resources that you have available. You have many, many more resources related to water incidents than I do, and probably more than the fire department does. Here's the fun part. Apply creative thinking and problem solving and evaluate every action that's taken. Never not make a decision. You'll regret that for the rest of your life. Make a knowledgeable decision, okay? Not just a random decision. Make a knowledgeable decision. Look at the outcome, and we can do something about that by making another decision. But if you don't make a decision, i.e., we don't turn on the water, we can't ask the people that are involved with that decision to do it at the time that they need it. So the decision would be to turn it on and talk to the other people later. Okay, and if you do the opposite, look at the result. Identify deviations and actions required. You're going to know more about the deviations than I am. If I'm the commander or if I'm the medical director or whatever I am in the disaster, my place is not going to be the same as your participate in continual education and participate in planning exercises and drills. Now, that means if you want to be involved, you got to do all these things. Okay, this is common day for you. You do this day in, day out with the jobs you do. We just put it in writing. Okay, now who's in charge of what? Well, this all depends on who's in charge of well, let's ask, who do you think is in charge? What's that? You're in charge? I'd love to give you the mic. Come on up. Who's in charge?
Person on the scene, I guess.
The person on the scene. You know, we have 200 people on the scene. Which one of them's in charge? The on-scene commander is in charge.
In our world, it would most likely be a Coast Guard on-scene commander.
Coast Guard. Okay. So you're saying that the Coast Guard is going to work with me on establishing hospitals and bathrooms for handicapped individuals?
Maybe not directly, but should know and probably should be aware.
Wait, he's really skirting this, isn't he? The question was, who's in charge? And the correct answer, which is exactly why you're skirting it, is of what?
Right.
What are you in charge of? Okay? You're the Marine Surveyor, okay? You may be in charge of all water operations. Or you may just be in charge of one incident. Here is a 250-foot boat that's in the middle of the city. Do something about it. Shouldn't be in the middle of the city. It should be in the water. Okay? But the real question here is who is in charge of what? And that makes a lot of common sense if you think about it. Because the higher up you go, the less that they're going to know about specifically what you're doing. So what the person in charge is going to want to do is go to the person who is in charge of what?
Yeah.
What the problem is, exactly. You may have 50 people that have under you. But if I'm there and I have a rescue team, I have a dog team, I have a medical team, I have a police officer team, a firefighting team, you know, searching an additional USAR team, everybody's got to be put to a task, and that team director is then in charge of that task. And it goes up. So here's the problem. Politics, press, and reality versus perception. If I'm the governor, I'm in charge of the state. If I'm the president, I'm in charge of the United States. Do you think the governor wants to make a decision about how we're going to do search and rescue? Do you think he cares at all about fuel and everything else that's pouring out there? Sure, he cares, but he's not going to be the one that's going to mitigate the problem. He's going to go to the person in charge, if they're smart. Okay, so this is really important. There are big differences between the East and the West and how they put those people in charge. And there's a lot of differences between North and South. If you're the emergency manager in Alabama, in that county, and there's a disaster, you're the end of the line. You're the one that has to answer to the governor. You're the one in charge of that scene. The incident commander there is going to be designating his commanders. And that incident commander in the South will answer to the emergency manager. So will the hospitals, so will the police, so will the hazmat team, everything else. If you're in Howard County, the fire chief is running it. Fire chief is running the whole incident. Okay? The emergency manager is there as a resource. Now, same thing goes with the USAR teams, the DMAT teams. There's a chain of command, but they're in the federal system. They don't have to answer to the scene commander, although they do. See the political dilemma? Exactly. So there's perception. Now, who's funding it? Now, most of these people go in as initially volunteers, including the rescue workers, the whole 9 yards. They come out of their training as paid people. So when we send a USAR team, you'll see under ASPR here, under HHS, ASPR is the Assistant Secretary of Preparedness and Response. And ASPR and FEMA control the urban search and rescue USAR teams. They also control the DMAT teams, which are the USAR teams are approximately 32 people. DMAT team is approximately 60, give or take, the people, including physicians, nurses, paramedics. The USAR team also has physicians, nurses, paramedics, and rescue specialists. Okay, the USAR team can call in another one, which is a canine unit, to assist the USAR team. The DMAT team can call in a DMORT team, disaster mortuary operation. Okay, ASPR controls all of that, Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response. And if you've been following the events in Hawaii, you'll see that right now they've split it. They have 5 what they call task forces. Maryland has a task force 1 in Maryland, Maryland Task Force 1. We have a Maryland Task Force 2, which is half and half. Sometimes it's reliable, sometimes it's not, whether or not we can get the people. Those people, once they're called to federal action, get paid by the federal government, and they are authorized to leave their job. So you can have a physician who's a surgeon who leaves the hospital to go with the DMAT team. Okay. Likewise, the employer cannot stop that person from going, which is even more interesting. Then you have a lot of private entities that get involved. My corporation does, religious organizations do. Lots of international teams that have the same capabilities are task force teams. The task force is all those teams put together, about 100 people, roughly. Okay. Again, these are varying because of what the mission is, what they're going to. Are they going to a tornado? Are they going to a tsunami? Are they going to a fire? Are they going to a boating incident, such as a cruise ship that's tipped over in the bay? You know, all of those things dictate what is the thing. The USAR team is not, I'm sorry, the task force and the USAR team, the DMAT teams, are not resources that you can get immediately. Okay, let me repeat that. These are federal teams. They require 72 hours to deploy. Okay, 72 hours. Once they deploy, they have a travel time. So you're looking at probably 96 hours until you're getting these assets. Everything else is local. Okay. Remember, time is critical. Now, there are times that we'll pre-position these assets. Cases of hurricanes, we do that all the time. Same thing with tornadoes. When we see that there's 100 tornadoes coming into an area, which happened, by the way, in Alabama and Georgia, we pre-position task forces as soon as the radar was showing those storms coming. So they were moving within 24 hours, which was a good thing. Okay, some of you have been military. How many have been military in the United States? Okay, are you aware of these? These are the merchant marine vessel called the ready ships. In Baltimore, we have 4 of them here. If anybody knows about the ready ships. Now, these ready ships are positioned 2 ready vessels to 1 tanker. Do I understand that? Those are continuously running vessels. In other words, they can pull up anchor and be underway in less than 30 minutes. And they bring their own fuel, and what's on there is everything you need to start a work. But that includes bulldozers, ambulances, flatbeds, cranes, as well as tanks and everything else that you need. Okay, they're all on board those ships. Food rations, the whole 9 yards. Everything you need to start a war or for a disaster are in those ships. I was off of the coast. I did a lot in the Pacific Rim over the last 12 years. Every island in the Pacific Rim, we reinforced the medical capabilities of it and also the aircraft capabilities for major disasters in every island in the Pacific. And I can only tell you that there's one island where we keep these, and currently there are 10 sets of these vessels sitting off of the beaches. And I wish I could show you a picture, but I didn't have a chance to upload it, of all these ships sitting ready to go there. Okay, how much time would it take to get from there to places in the Pacific that we may need them? Not much at all. Not much at all. Unfortunately, this is a DoD project. And DoD has stated we can't use these in natural disasters. So there it is. It's there, but we can't use it. Case in point, the island that they're sitting off of right now was hit directly by a hurricane. It destroyed 3/4 of the city that was there, and these ships never moved. Everything had to be brought in from other islands. Here's an example of that 50-bed portable hospital. This all fits in 2 28-foot trailers. It's approximately 16 tons of equipment. Each one of the trailers holds 16,000 pounds. That can be deployed, as I said, in 1 hour with 6 individuals. So when we're responding, what are the things that we're interested in? Okay, number one, ever since this great thing came along, which we just went through, called pandemic, we're going to identify the hazards. Okay, well, there's our first problem. Every time an ambulance or a fire truck goes off into a call, they're facing hazardous materials every time. If a car is burning, those seats that are burning have chemicals in them. If they're seeing patients in a house, that person may have God knows what disease. Everything anymore is a hazardous material response. Therefore, we've got to limit our exposure to those areas. More importantly, we have to have the right protective equipment to go into those areas. And furthermore, if you're part of the team, you're charged with protecting the patient, your colleagues, and your community. In what order?
Patient first. Like what?
No,
No.
no. You and your colleagues come first. If you die, you're 4 or 5 more casualties, attempting to save 1 life. Okay, so you save yourself first. They can't revive you if you're not. You can revive them. So it's always this. Never forget the guy who goes to defibrillate and he doesn't say clear. And the other doctor who's touching the patient gets shocked as well as the patient, right? And he falls over. So the test question is, which one do you resuscitate? The doctor or the patient? There's a lot of controversy over this answer, but the correct one is you shock the doctor and then you shock the patient. Okay, so you are the most important thing. I can tell you that I have lost now 38 and Ray can attest to this. I've lost 38 friends of mine in this industry. Died on the spot at the scene 38 times. Okay. One of those gentlemen was taking my place in something that I should have been doing. And he took my place and he ended up killing himself. So, most important thing is that if we keep our eyes on the problem and we don't end up with our ass in the air and this is not responding. We said something. We don't end up with our head in the ice chest trying to react.
Chat in.
Apologize for the delay.
Try to start again.
Okay.
Try and confuse it.
Okay, yeah, okay, so first, most important thing is to keep yourself calm, cool, collected. Now, how are we going to use you? Why am I standing here before you, and what do I think that you can do to help me? Well, here's a start. This is water rescue. Now, you're all experts on the water, right? What do you see? Are these safe?
Safer than the alternative, perhaps?
It's a good way to put it. Our goal is to keep everybody safe, right? That's the first consideration. We don't even have life jackets on the people that we're rescuing, do we? Those boats are overloaded. I don't think you've ever seen this one before because I put those Chinese people on that little raft and made them go out in the middle of a pond. And while they were out there, they picked up some shrimp and some fish and everything else just for the fun of it. But that is basically a life raft. So what it does, it's just like an airplane. You blow that up and it's a walkway. And these are the walkways that we use to get people out of the hospitals in Katrina. It's 30 feet long, 10 feet wide. We were able to blow it up, go right into the hospital door and right onto the boat. Isn't that amazing? You can see this is a police vessel. Here's a fire vessel. These are all in the middle of the streets when they're responding. This is an incident here locally. I won't tell you where, but the school should give it away. It's on the water, and the rescue workers were bringing students out. Okay, but one of the things that we need somebody specializing in water is water rescue and water safety. And we try to do it, but our first responders are tied up with the incident. And sometimes you get those blinders on, you lose perspective. If this little kid falls off the boat, how are these two rescuers and this operator gonna get the boat to save them? Really? They can't even get down here to work off the front. Now, you do the best you can with what you have, right? So we're not criticizing the people that are here, but what we're saying is safety is a priority. So we want to consider some of these things. We even have boats that have wheels. Why do you need a boat with wheels? Anybody want to see one of these? You can go down to Annapolis Harbor. There's one sitting right down there. They're called an amp. amphibious boat. Okay, and many of the fire departments are going to this now. They can literally not have a trailer and just simply drive this thing into the water and take off. Technical assistance. Okay, this is the tanker that went into downtown New Orleans. Nobody want to tell me how we're going to get it from downtown. And by the way, this is the levee that it's up on. Is that one tug going to be able to move that whole ship? It's full, by the way, if you want to know. Totally full. Is that tug going to do it? No. Somebody made a decision that that tug's going to do it. And obviously, it's not enough effort. They're just wasting their time. Time is valuable in a disaster. You're the experts. You're the survivors. Seriously. Okay, but where can I send my teams? Tell me a point to start. Where's a safe point to risk 80 lives to clear that area? I've got buildings. If you haven't seen, these are dry docks. This is water over here. These are all boats that probably had people on because they were too big to move and they wanted to stay and protect their investment. There's probably people in all these buildings.
Is that a street right at the top?
I'm sorry?
Is that a street coming in at the top?
Yes, it is, right up there. In fact, this is a street in the parking lot. This is a parking lot. There's a street over here. And more importantly is, how can I move these things? Can you tell me the size of crane that I need to move that boat? Big ass crane, right? Big ass crane.
I've got that board. All the parts and pieces you gotta move to get.
We actually started dragging those out of there using the big monster semi tow trucks.
Yep.
I was there.
There's the answer. Where did we start?
We started at the beginning.
That's where we started. We were able to get to that point, and thank you for your input. We started the houses first, and then as the teams broke through the houses and the buildings, they got down to here and they started working this way. And then the question is, when can we legally move a vessel?
Well, that all depends on there was a couple of situations there where the power companies that were restringing the lines, we had to move some before they restrung the lines, otherwise we couldn't get them under the new ones.
Yep.
That was on the road that went into Fort Myers Beach. That was east of the causeway,
Yes.
Collier Boulevard, whatever it was.
Yep.
That's kind of where we started with everything.
So
And
here's a prime example. You know,
the
there's
biggest foul up was that they changed direction at the last minute. The insurance companies are fighting people because they didn't follow the hurricane plans, but they couldn't because they locked down the drawbridge.
Yep.
So nobody could move their boats off there.
exactly why all the big boats were stuck in there,
That's what
right?
you were talking about earlier. The left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. Nobody could make a decision, and the bridge tenders locked the bridge down and went home. Therefore, nobody could go anywhere. Now the insurance companies are fighting them. They don't want to pay the claims because they didn't follow the hurricane plans, even though they couldn't.
Exactly. And here's a position where if we
And we
had
have
somebody,
somebody that doesn't give a shit.
exactly, if we had somebody though that was on the ground that knew that there was a bridge there and that the bridge had to be opened, that could have
Well,
happened.
they fought it.
They fought it, but exactly.
Too many layers.
Here's a question that was put forward to us. They noticed that this is what caused the flooding of New Orleans, right here. This is the break of the levee. Early on, they noticed that there was this barge that was sitting there. So the question was, will the barge, if we flip it, fill the gap and stop the flooding? What do you think?
begin with temporary at best. It might slow it.
No,
Push through and make a bigger hole.
there's no.
No is the answer, exactly. But that was one of the considerations that came up the chain. Can we get something in there and move this thing? And will it work if we do it?
Thinking outside the box. So
Yeah.
Exactly. Safety advisor. You were there. I'm gonna have to lean on you a little bit. Again, is this safe to put a USAR team of 32 men? All different things. Some of them are physicians, some of them are rescue workers, firefighters, EMTs, paramedics, dog teams with their handlers and the dogs. How would you address this?
Have to send in, they sent in their firefighters and disaster people first. They didn't send in medical people and they didn't send in a lot of people in the beginning. They had to first do a primary assessment.
So those people that you're calling the rescue people, that's the
Yeah.
USAR team, they are EMTs, paramedics.
Right.
By nature, so they're it's not that we didn't follow with a medical crew, there's always a position that's also on that USAR team.
There was SAR teams that they. put in.
Search and rescue teams that went in, and a lot of them were what they call the Navy down there,
Cajun Navy.
the Cajun Navy,
Not in, oh, well, not in Fort Myers.
not in Fort Myers, but the Cajun Navy did go to Fort Myers.
Yes, they did, yeah.
Cajun Navy did show up in Fort Myers, so
Call it the senior citizen.
there you go, exactly. How much engineering do you have in this? I mean, you have a limited amount of engineering that you've been involved with, especially when it comes to boats. Again, if we have somebody that we find in this boat, we got to get them out of there on a litter, okay? And there's not a helicopter that's coming to help us. So we're dragging them over all this. And as you know, this is 3 to 4 feet deep. Another problem. Everything's a chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear incident. In Katrina, one day I saw 9 of the CST teams. The CST teams are civilian assistance teams that are run by the National Guard. And when those guys come in, there is a serious chemical or biological problem. 9 of them showed up to one of the hospitals that was downtown New Orleans. Why? Because they had a level 4 research lab. They were studying with monkeys, Ebola, the plague, and a whole bunch of other nice things that were 20 feet below water at the hospital in the basement. So all of a sudden they showed up. I didn't hear anything about it. I didn't know why they were there. They weren't going to tell me why they were there. It was the director of the hospital that told me why they were there. And by the way, the hospital still had patients in it. Can you tell me what the hazards are here? Can you tell me what hazard you don't have here?
Right.
Okay, so here's another, I'm assuming that these boats are diesel. Okay, but maybe that one isn't. Maybe that's a gas boat. I'm assuming that probably has propane on it. But I'm assuming this one probably doesn't. My assumptions could cost lives. Okay, so you've got to figure out what it is. What are the risks here? What is the exposure? How can we put out a fire if it's this boat that's on fire? What are we going to use and how are we going to approach it? How about the conception? Was anybody here involved with it?
I just followed.
So here you have a boat. Doesn't look like that big of a boat to me. 34 lives were lost. Why?
Stupidity.
Cell phone batteries,
Cell phone batteries.
It's a
or
charge.
tablet batteries, one of the two.
Right.
Runs out of a PDA.
So look at that awareness program that we've never followed up with. I can tell you, I carry cell phones all the time on my boat. Never thought about it. I've left them out in the middle of the sun too. How many times? And never thought a bit about it.
Plug it in beside your bed every night,
What's that?
plug it in beside your bed every night.
Absolutely. You know, what are the risks? How about this one?
Stupidity.
How are you going to advise the rescue crew to approach this? I mean, obviously, there are compartmentalization of this boat. Okay, there's compartmentalization. Where do I approach it? How do I approach it? How do I move people out of there once I find them? If I've got to cut through there, where do I cut to gain access? These are all problems that I can't tell you the answer. Maybe a marine surveyor who's familiar with that kind of a boat would be able to help me with that. So tell me, is this a boat problem or a house problem? And is it safe for me to check the house?
That was down in Islands, that was down at Tortola or BVI after Maria and Irma, but
That's a marine boat, I think.
yeah.
You're gonna laugh. This particular one was Alaska and was caused by the earthquake,
No, it's not.
tsunami after the earthquake.
I saw a lot of that stuff in Irma and Maria down.
Same thing, same type of thing. But what's the dilemma here? Well, look, what are those? Escape rafts, right? Safety rafts. The question is, are there people aboard there? I mean, how can you tell if there's people or not aboard there? How do you go about checking for people aboard there? What size crane do I need to move that boat? And by the way, is that a salvageable vessel? Or is it gone? Because then I can cut it up, right? Search and rescue. Advise me.
That's the Cracker Jack, I surveyed that.
This one.
That was a news team that ran out, that left their SUV. And when he came back, that's what they saw.
Well, you just ruined it because I was gonna say, well, there's somebody stuck in there.
They were running up the road when the water was coming.
Look what happened.
There it is.
Okay, so if indeed there were people on board, again, what are you gonna advise the rescue team to do? I mean, do they open this car door, which has a little obstruction there, like called a propeller?
Right.
Or how do we approach this from a medical, a rescue, humane approach to this incident? And can you help me? Another question, we're on the water. What do we need to do to, first off, contain the hazmat situation? Make it safe for the team to go in, and where do we start? Don't tell me that you surveyed the Big Papa
I
too.
did not, no, I did
Okay.
not go to the shrimp.
You didn't go this route, okay. But look what's behind it,
Well, was mobile homes.
all mobile motorhomes too, mobile, a lot of mobile ones. All filled with gas, by the way, gas and propane. The Chinese have an easy way to approach this. What's that? Yeah, and lithium. Chinese have a real easy way to approach this. They don't look at it from a humanitarian perspective. Where's that? This is one of their extrication devices. Here you have the claw, and here you have the shovel. And the way they start the disasters is just by going in and boop, bonk, boop, bonk. They're searching as they're pulling things out. If the body falls out, they found it. If not, they're dead anyhow, so what's the big thing? I gave a lecture over there at the first emergency management conference in China. And I talked to them about Katrina, and I told them about this girl that we couldn't save. She was at the dome. She was a young 6-year-old, and we had no IV fluid, so no way to hydrated. There was nothing. There wasn't even water. We didn't even have water on us. Okay, she was unconscious. Her mother limp in her mother's arms, and her mother, after we left, and there was still a DMAT team there that tried to help her, walked 10 miles with her in her arms, broke through the fence at the airport, walked out onto the runway and put her daughter on a C-130. That C-130 went up, and this is where we lost all of our patients. The federal system then sent those planes all over the United States. She happened to go to Alabama, to Birmingham, Alabama, where we had a 50-bed portable hospital on the runway with a pediatric emergency physician who took care of her. She survived. And 3 weeks after I returned home, I'm sitting watching the news on Sunday morning, and I start to cry. My family comes over to me and says, "What are you crying about, Dad?" I said, "That little girl I couldn't save, but her mother did." Perseverance was the reason. The Chinese made fun of me. "Why were you worried about one person?" This is a disaster, Joe. We lost 7,300. Why was she special? I can't tell you, but she was. Their approach is completely different from our approach to disaster response. They simply remove and move on. What calculations are involved in this? Now, I don't remember anything in my master's courses and getting my master's captain license that taught me calculations of any sort that would help me in this project. I don't understand it, but maybe you do. What's your suggestion? I have no idea. Where do I start? And this is a repeat slide, so you know the answer of how we did it. But this is a real problem, because the people that are responding aren't experts in this area. You may have a lot of people that have boats, but they certainly don't have the expertise to make the decisions. Environmental impact, we have to talk about this. We have to address it as quickly as possible, especially the oil discharges and the gas discharges. And that's all part of the search and rescue. There's got to be a point at which you stop and take care of that so it doesn't affect other people as well. What point it is, I'm not sure. When does the salvage and transport of vessels occur? Sometimes this can begin immediately for areas that have been cleared. Other times they'll wait until the entire scene of the disaster is cleared of patients. But this is a hard decision, because there's a whole economy that's being affected by this. And every day that you delay the start of recovery is a day that they're losing billions of dollars in their economy. I can't answer this, but I can tell you that there are legal ramifications to everything that you do during a disaster. Everything. This was kind of unique, because look at the vessels that are on the road and up in here, and look at the wires and the poles. They weren't affected. How the heck did they get that? Well, there you see how they got it under. It floated, and it just got stopped by the wire there, and that's where that boat lays to rest. Concluding points. I thank you for giving me this time. Critical response web, which is what I call this, is comprehensive and all composing disaster mitigation, all hazard response. The emergency responders have multiple functions and roles. You have the opportunity to define a role that you might be able to help. And where do you begin? You begin local. Ask the fire department where the fireboat is and who the crew is. Hey, do you guys ever have a situation that we might be able to help you? You know, we're a good resource. Go to EMS and ask them the same thing. Talk to the hospital if they're near water. Hey, what's your plan? Go to the emergency manager. Talk to the county emergency. If you want to, talk to the federal response teams. They are all embedded within all those other organizations. And it's very simple to contact the USAR team, and they'll put you in touch with the proper people. They will give you training so that you're like every other member of the team, but you are there as your special. Communicate between everybody. You will be essential because you've got knowledge that we don't. And remember that everybody's essential on that team. You're going to fail. And you're also going to succeed many times, but don't ever stop. You can't stop. You have to reevaluate and you got to move on. There is not a choice whether or not to become involved. Believe it or not, we all learn from our mistakes and grow from our pains. Future's in your hands and you can make a difference. Now, I'm going to give you one example here in Maryland. Around 2010, the federal government was going around, they were very concerned about nuclear bombs, briefcase bombs. And so the fire chief in Baltimore City was apprised of the fact that they were there and that on that Wednesday, he was going to have a nuclear bomb test where they were going to put a bomb on the corner of one of the intersections in the center of the city. He was going to have to evacuate a couple buildings to demonstrate their capability. They were also going to have to respond to it with fire, EMS, and police. And that this test, he was given 48 hours notice. Well, the fire chief had done something special. He actually had together an advisory team. And this fire chief is no longer here, but that chief had us all meet on Saturday morning when it happened. He called us all in and we all went. And amongst them was a nuclear physicist from Hopkins. And they went through their scenario. By the way, the drill was going to cost somewhere between $150,000 and $250,000 to have this drill. Went through the whole scenario. Fire chief dispatches everybody. All the different teams start taking their roles seriously and responding in. And this little guy keeps standing up and going, "Ooh, ooh, ooh. Chief!" Ooh. He says, "Can I use your board?" And he runs over to the whiteboard, takes a pen, and he says, "Okay, so the bomb is this size, and the amount of radioactive material is this much, and it's in this size of a container, and it's in this area, and it's this, all this, and the next thing you know, there's formulas all over this board." We're all sitting there saying, "What the hell is he doing? I mean, this is going to be pretty easy. It's a normal drill. We got to get everybody out of the buildings." And he says, "And therefore, the bomb is going to destroy the radioactive material. I recommend a 10-foot perimeter." We all stopped. And the chief looked over at people from FEMA and said, "I'm ordering a 20-foot perimeter. Cancel all resources." 15 minutes into this actual drill, which cost almost $250,000, this specialist solved the problem for us with calculations I still can't remember. But he knew what he was doing, and this was his field, this was his niche, and he was able to solve this problem. They took a year off from going around to the rest of the states in the United States, asked this gentleman to join their team, and rebuilt the whole episode. So that's just one example of how one person can make a difference. And so I really thank you today for the opportunity to speak with you. Those of you online, I can take any questions at this point. If not, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Fantastic. Really interesting.
Yeah.
Did you learn something?
Yes.
How many of you are going to sign up for something? Come on.
They're all funded.
Be a consultant for them. They need it. They won't have you all the time. Just go tell them what you can do. And they're willing, right? Believe me, right now is a good time because they need help and they don't understand your industry. Not at all. So just because the firefighter is on the boat as part of the fire rescue team, he doesn't really know what he's doing when he's going out to that tank. Thank you.